Nobody wants to come sit in the front? Thank you. Come on, sit in the front, folks. Make me feel like it's a campfire. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sophia Chang, and I'm proud to say that I was raised by Wu-Tang. I'd like to thank Panos Panay and Nicole Davy of ICE and Carl Beatty, who's not here, unfortunately, of Artist and Music Industry Relations, for inviting me to be part of the Creative Entrepreneurs Conversations. And a special, where's Brenda? Brenda's not here? Well, a special thanks to Brenda Bailey from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion for the honor of being the first Asian to participate. Thank you very much. Shout out to the Asians. So allow me to provide some background. As Pano said, I was born and raised in Vancouver, the child of Korean immigrants. Are there any first-gen immigrants in the crowd? Woo! Yes, okay. Destined for academia. My father, God rest his soul, was a mathematician. My mother, a lifelong librarian. My brother is a tenured English professor at Vassar, and incidentally, the 10 smartest people I know. And I was a French lit major, honors. Though seemingly impractical. The education that I got, the muscles that I developed in university, namely reading, writing, analysis, and just thinker, all of those skills that have helped me immeasurably throughout my career. So whatever you guys can glean from that, I tell you that you should hold on to it. Panos and I were just talking about the benefits of a liberal arts education. Upon graduating, I moved to New York, where I got a gig working for Paul Simon. I was very, very fortunate, and it was there that I was introduced to the most elite echelons of the music industry. I met the mighty Mo Austin, Lenny Waronker, and Michael Austin, who were running Warner Brothers Records, which was Paul's label at the time. And Michael, in addition to becoming a dear friend of mine and a mentor, he has stood by me throughout for decades. He's been with me for every personal and professional triumph and disappointment. Mentorship is very important. It's amazing if you're fortunate enough to get a mentor, and when you are in a position to do so, I encourage everybody to be mentors as well. After Paul Simon, I put in my time at various labels. I did my bid, as I like to say. I did alternative marketing at Atlantic. I did A&R at Jive, where I signed a couple members of Hieroglyphics and worked with Tribe Called Quest, BDP, Too Short, E40, and UGK, among other artists. After that, RZA asked me to be the general manager of Epic, of Razor Sharp, which was his joint venture with Epic. But after Jive, I actually left Jive with a colleague there to become a consultant, and we went back to Warner Brothers with Michael and Lenny to be consultants there, consulting in the hip-hop division. My most recent time at a label was just a few years ago. Michael Austin and his team got me a job as the Senior Vice President of A&R Administration and Operations at Universal. How many of you know what that means, to do A&R admin? Essentially, I oversaw all of the recording budgets and numerous legal clearances for every release on Republic Island and Def Jam records. I learned a lot there. It's really complicated putting out a record these days, especially a hip-hop record with all of the writers and the samples and the features and everything. My most recent gig in music was at the company. It was both a management company and a label that housed Joey Badass, Pro Era, Mick Jenkins. Yeah, Mick is amazing, and G Herbo. I was the general manager and the de facto COO, and I essentially ran the company from top to bottom: marketing, PR, HR, finance, professional development, business strategy, and instituted systems to improve efficiency. Though I learned a lot at labels, my true calling came in 1995 when Old Dirty Bastard, God rest his soul, from Wu-Tang asked me to be his manager. Now, managing ODB might sound oxymoronic, and it certainly came with its challenges, but we had a phenomenal working rapport. We had a lot of fun together, and we accomplished a lot together in the time that we worked together. Aside from his undeniable talent, he was wise, kind, generous, hilariously funny, and intensely and ferociously loyal and protective. Yeah, exactly, one of his many monikers. In addition to ODB, in my management career, I've been fortunate enough to work with GZA, RZA, which means that I managed all three-letter members of Wu-Tang. RZA, GZA, Q-Tip, A Tribe Called Quest, Black Alicious, Organized Noise, Raphael Sadiq, and D'Angelo, all remarkable talents. Around the time that I was managing ODB, and as a direct result of my proximity to Wu-Tang, I decided that I wanted to study Kung Fu. And I met my ex, Shi Yanming, who's a 34th generation Shaolin monk, and I started training with him. We fell in love, and I left the music business in order to focus on him, focus on the temple, and to focus on our relationship. Over the next several years, I trained 15 hours a week. I had 2 kids. I led 2 tours to Shaolin Temple, the first of which RZA accompanied us, and he became the first artist ever to perform on the 1,500-year-old steps of the Shaolin Temple. It was amazing. We also took RZA to the original Wu-Tang Temple. There is a Wu-Tang Temple. It's in Hebei province. It's at the top of a mile-high mountain. It's beautiful. It's pristine. And the actual abbot of Wu-Tang Temple gave RZA, the abbot of Wu-Tang clan, a gift of music. And it was this surreal and sublime experience. So after my daughter, our second, was born, and at this point I have 2 kids under 2, but I decided that I kind of wanted to get back into the world. I wrote a screenplay called Wu-Tang and Shaolin based on my ex and the RZA. I sold that to HBO. I also fell into fashion, and I'm glad that Panos referred to, our narratives taking different paths and being able to be flexible. I produced major runway shows for Vivienne Tam and Project Runway All-Stars, as well as some other designers. I also worked at a digital agency, a terrific digital agency in New York called Sarkisian Mason, and about a year ago, the owner of that agency asked me to meet with a cannabis management company called MedMen. I met with them back in September. They wanted to connect with a former client of mine, and I asked all sorts of questions. I just found it so fascinating what they were doing, and by the end of that meeting, they said, wow, Sophia, whether or not we work with him, we definitely want to work with you. Just this past May, they stayed true to their word, and they hired me, and I'm currently doing business development there. So, though it might, if any of you know, though it might seem ironic that Sophia Chang, who's never smoked in my life, although I've been weed adjacent for many years, is working for a weed company, it doesn't come as any surprise to people who know me well, because I am a serial entrepreneur. I am a compulsive hustler, and this is an industry, and I'm sure you're aware of this is an industry that right now is like the Wild West. It's a wide open field, and there's so much that you can do in it, and I find that incredibly, incredibly exciting and enticing. In addition to that, I'm acutely aware of the issues of social justice. I'm sure you know this as well. Black and brown men tend to be arrested at exponential rates, exponentially higher rates than white men for marijuana offenses, but are no more likely to use. And there's a lot that needs to happen in the area of reform here. So in reviewing my career, 2 things stand out. One, that the people who hired me did so, a number of them, just upon meeting me. They trusted their instincts and they took risks. These are 2 valid qualities that I value highly. I think that especially in this time and age, and if you want to be in any position of management or leadership, you should think about these things as you go out into the world. Second is that they put me on because they recognize my passion. You guys are at Berklee. I don't need to talk to you about passion. You're here because you are pursuing something that is important to you. I've been fortunate enough to pursue my passion for my whole career. And I would encourage you, even after you leave here, to continue to do the same. But in the same breath, we have to acknowledge the fact that pursuing your passion, of course, is a privilege, right? Not everybody has the luxury to pursue their passion. I've never been purely driven by money. Of course, I'm a pragmatist. I'm a single mother of 2. But it was never at the core of the engine that drove me. It's not that I don't value it nor appreciate what it can acquire. It's just that I have seen the price that too many people pay for the paper chase, and it's more dear than the soul can afford. Yes, there were times when I was flat broke and stressed out, but I was always happy and at peace with the choices that I made because I'd followed my heart and expressed my truth. And I can say that of every artist that I've ever managed. As many of you may know, earlier this year, back in the spring, Fife from A Tribe Called Quest passed away, God rest his soul. And at his memorial, it was a beautiful memorial service. A dear friend of his, Quest Green, was the host of the evening. And during one of the, during one of kind of the interstitials between people coming up to pay tribute and performing, he delivered this message on behalf of the departed. Tell your story. And he just paced the stage and said these three words over and over and over again. He said, tell your story. And I sat there in the audience, and I was already moved because of the evening's proceedings, but this message in particular resonated deeply within me, and is frankly a large part of the impetus of me being here and standing in front of you, telling my story. So I encourage you, whatever your story is, go out there and tell your story. This is how you become who you are. This is how you forge your path. But this is also how we come together, by telling and sharing our stories. So let me get a sense of the stories that are in this room. How many of you are aspiring artists? Wow. How many of you are aspiring managers? Good. And how many of you are aspiring label executives? Okay. So this is my advice for you. Caveat being, of course, this is coming from Sophia Chang. It's a singular and it's a unique perspective. For the artists, I would say, be true to yourselves. Do what you really feel in your soul. It may not be popular, nor easy, nor make you rich, but art should be as honest as it is personal. So when I managed Raphael Saadiq, I used to wear this t-shirt that said, Raphael Saadiq is the truth. And I was so inspired not only by his creative talent, but also by his creative integrity. Now, I never wear logos. I don't wear logos, I don't wear graphics, none of that. I leave that to my teenage children. Supreme, supreme, supreme all day long. I was so inspired that I went onto Google and I ordered the letters online, like these old school black felt letters. And I got them and I ironed them one by one, fastidiously, perfectly spaced, perfectly centered onto a pristine white t-shirt. And I rocked that shirt like a sandwich board. It was like, I was really like a walking billboard. And everywhere that I wore that t-shirt, people would look at me and say, yeah, he is. Or they would just look at me and nod silently, like, and I was so delighted by the response that I got. Like Raphael, D'Angelo, who's one of Raphael's closest friends and most brilliant collaborators, has also only ever expressed his truth. These two, and I know them very well. I've not only managed them, but they are dear friends of mine. They are constitutionally incapable of pandering. They're not there studying the charts, figuring out what the trends are, which way is it going? Should I do this kind of music, that kind of music? Should this person do a feature? Should that person do a feature? That's not what they're doing. They never set out to write a pop smash. Honestly, they probably could if they tried, but that was never what they set out to do. They never have and they never will clamor for top 40 love and I've got to get a #1 on Billboard. If they get it, that's great. But it was never the goal. They consider themselves to be divine vessels who let their God-given gifts pour into them and then pour forth to us lucky listeners. The other thing that I will say about Raphael and D'Angelo, if you're ever fortunate enough to see them in concert, you must go. Their shows are remarkable. There are no pyrotechnics, no backup dancers, no hype men. But I have to say that I read this to Raphael, and after I read it, he said, so you should probably tell them that one day I might perform where there are pyrotechnics. But it's not the goal. And I said, no, I get it. And so all there is there's the voices, the instruments, and the songs. And what's so amazing about it, as is the case for so many masters in the field, is they make it look effortless. You know this if you're a fan of sports or any of the arts, right? But believe me, they pay super close attention to every aspect of their shows. And they are dogged about rehearsal. They rehearse, rehearse, and rehearse before they get on stage. One of Raphael's backup singers once told me that they had a move where they put their arm and their leg up at the same time. And he made them practice in front of a mirror to make sure that when they did that, I can't do it because I'm wearing a dress, but that their arm and their leg were perfectly parallel. Now that's Kung Fu. And for you folks who want to work at labels, be prepared for no training, lots of politics, and long hours. Remember that this is an industry who created a project, manufactured and sold a product, and then woke up one morning and it was out there for free all over the world. The industry imploded. As a result of that, there were lots and lots of mergers. When I was coming up in the music business, there were lots of major labels, and then they all started merging, right? And so what happened is, if Panos and I did the same job at 2 different labels, and then those labels merged, they were going to get rid of whichever one of us was more expensive. So you had a lot of layoffs. And to this day, up at the labels, there is still a fear of, not necessarily mergers, I don't know that they can merge anymore, but there's still the fear of layoffs. And what happens as a result of this, and it's not any sense of malice, it's just what happens to industries like this. As a result, it has created an atmosphere of what I call corporate paranoia. And it means that people, when they're fearing for their jobs, tend to behave badly. They throw their colleagues under the bus. They spend a lot of time covering their tracks. And as you can imagine, this leaves very little time to focus on the job at hand and to be creative. And because of the diminished revenue, everyone is working too hard and too late. Of course, there are kind, loyal, and magnanimous folks working at the labels. Of course there are. And yes, for me when I was there, the steady paychecks was great, fantastic benefits was wonderful, and I really had good times and met a lot of wonderful people. But for the women who hope to be powerful executives and mothers, I issue this warning with all my heart. Caveat emptor. Do you know what that means? Buyer beware. Because tempus fugit, like a motherfucker. Do you know what tempus fugit means? Thank you. Latin major here. So I need you to pay attention for the women. Think about this. You'll graduate from here when you're 22. And if you're lucky, you get a job right out of the gate. You're 22. You're expected to be an assistant. You'll be an assistant. You're expected to be an assistant for 2 years, and you get promoted to coordinator at 24. At 26, you become a manager, and so on and so on and so on. And if you are very lucky and very talented, at 35, you're a senior vice president. Maybe that's as high as you want to go. But 8 years ago, at 27, was when your fertility started to decline. I'm telling you this, I'm not trying to urge you to have children. That is a deeply, deeply personal choice. However, if being a mother is a lifetime goal, I want you to be educated. How many of the women in this room, how many of us were told how not to get pregnant time and time again? All of us, right? Wow, you were never told how not to get pregnant? We're all told how not to get pregnant. How many healthcare professionals or your mother ever sat you down and told you what I just did, which is, you know what, honey, you need to pay attention because at 27 your fertility starts to decline? Okay, well, you're the rare exception because most of the women that I know, nobody's ever had that conversation with them. And at 35, you all know this if you've been exposed to that, at 35, the rate of complications rises dramatically. I actually think that this is a conspiracy of silence. So for the women in the room, I want you to pay attention to that because I have too many friends who are 40, who are in the music business, that put in all their time and had all the fun and went on the road and everything and woke up in 40 and said, I'm single, I don't have any prospects, and I don't have children. Where did my life go? That is a real phenomenon. And to whatever degree that I can kind of warn you against that, I want to. For all the amazing advancements that we've made in medicine, we have not been able to slow the inexorable ticking of our biological clocks. And finally, to the aspiring managers, I cannot stress this enough. It is a service industry. Like Midas Muffler, Jamba Juice, the dry cleaner, it is a service industry. To be a good manager, you must subjugate your own needs and desires to those of your client. First and foremost, this is about propelling the artist's career. And if you do a good job, then yours too will advance. You are the artist's proxy, and you must respectfully and responsibly represent them when they are not in the room. And in order to do this, you must fully and clearly understand your artist's vision, aesthetic, and sensitivities. This takes time and patience and the fundamental understanding that it's about your artist. It's not about you. If you just want 100,000 followers and you want to walk the red carpet, you're not an artist. You're a wannabe manager. If you just take incoming calls and never go out there and hustle on behalf of your artist, you're not a manager. You're an answering service. If you want to go out there and get your dick sucked and smoke blunts and cop free gear, you're not an artist. You're a freeloader. If you never have the hard conversations with your artist, you are not a manager. You're a damager. Don Passman writes in his book, All You Need to Know About the Music Business. Do you guys know this book? I'm sure you do, of course you do. Quote, the personal manager is the single most important person in your professional life. A good manager can expand your career to its maximum potential, and a bad one can rocket you into oblivion. When the job is done properly, a personal manager is the general manager and the chief operating officer of your enterprise. And this is what I love about being a manager. You're involved in every aspect of a manager's career. You help choose and oversee the whole team: label, publisher, agent, attorney, business manager, publicist, tour manager. And another reason I find this job so fulfilling is that it allows you to be a creative entrepreneur in a way that the labels don't. My experience is that labels, they give you a title, they put you in a box, and then they tell you to stand there. How many of us have heard too many times the hackney cliche, think outside the box? Yeah. The problem with that is that it implies that you still exist within its confines. It just asks you to kind of stretch beyond it. Well, I'll tell you something. There is no box that can contain Sophia Chang. There are no walls that can hem me in. So I don't just say, come on, everybody, think outside the box. I say, crush the box. Obliterate it. Don't let anybody, I don't care who it is, family, parents, school, society, tell you what your horizons are and what your limits are. There are no limits. You should go out there and you should believe that there are no limits to what you can do until you discover them yourself. Don't let somebody else impose those boundaries on you. So I know no one who embodies all of these principles, right? Crushing the box, telling your story, taking risks, pushing boundaries, and stepping out of your comfort zone. These are all things that I think are critical to success, right? You can't just kind of stay in your lane. There's a certain kind of success that comes with that, but I'm going to assume that that's not what any of you here are seeking. I know no one that embodies these principles more than the RZA, who has pursued his passion and told his story with unswerving vim, vigor, and conviction. He has always been the author of his own narrative, weaving it scrupulously, strategically, and presciently. From the door, for decades he's done this. He is a master chess player and walks through life according to the tenets of the game. When the Wu-Tang demo first circulated, it had the whole industry buzzing. 9 guys? Staten Island? Who calls himself the Abbot? But the one thing, the answer that we did have, and the thing that we did know, was that we'd never heard anything like it. It was like these 9 MCs were jumping out of the speakers and grabbing you by the throat, daring you not to listen. And at the foundation of the songs, of course, were RZA's beats, which lifted the hood and exposed the underbelly of New York. He created an anecdotal and sonic landscape that felt like the grimy city itself, the city I love. None of the labels would touch the deal because RZA audaciously asked for something called the non-exclusive. Do you know what that means? It essentially means that you sign all 9 of my guys, but all of us have the right to go elsewhere. Nobody does that. Nobody does that. Loud, fledgling label Loud eventually signed them because they were a small label on the come up, but they knew that if they signed Wu-Tang, that it would put them on the map, and it certainly did. RZA single-handedly broke a long-standing and intractable precedent. And frankly, I don't know that every artist thereafter said, I want a non-exclusive like Wu-Tang, I want a non-exclusive like Wu-Tang. I don't know that they ever gave it to anybody else, especially seeing the success of the solo artists that went elsewhere. I first met RZA when he was shopping the Gravediggers. We went out for lunch, and it was immediately clear to me that this guy was a genius. Now, I don't use that term lightly. And in fact, I scorn the overuse of it. That along with icon and legend. But he is all three of those things. His vision for Wu-Tang was innovative, and he is an autodidact whose interests reach far beyond hip-hop. Besides music and film, he's an ardent student of martial arts, science, religion, world cultures, among many other topics. RZA's insatiable intellectual curiosity is an integral component of his enduring success and relevance and being able to excel at any challenge that he takes on. Like RZA, many artists have toured the world, but I promise you, when RZA gets to a town, his visits are very different. He doesn't look for the nearest McDonald's or the local weed spot. He goes out there and he seeks cultural exploration, whether he goes and has conversations with the locals or finds these little spots that will unveil the beauty and the mystery of the city that he's in. People might think the Wu-Tang's obsession with martial arts movies is just about the action, and it very well may have started that way, as it did for many of us, myself included, but it quickly developed into an admiration of the philosophy and the culture, particularly the themes of a righteous few against many, brotherhood, and loyalty. Upon meeting my ex, RZA started training right away. In 2001, I introduced RZA to Harvey Weinstein, who was then the head of Miramax Films. And Miramax were going to release Donnie Yen's classic Iron Monkey. Have any of you seen it? It's an amazing kung fu movie. We're going to release it in the States, and he offered RZA a pretty penny to host the screening in New York. And RZA declined payment. He said, you know what? I don't want the money, because he loved the movie, but he also really identified with Harvey and his brother Bob Weinstein. They were New Yorkers, they had disrupted the film industry, and RZA and his brother had done the same in music, so he didn't do it. But I added the caveat that if RZA were to host the screening, that he had to meet Quentin Tarantino, who was presenting the movie. You know, they say presented by presenting the movie to the US audiences. And I was lucky enough to be there when they met. They were, well, first of all, they got on like a house on fire, but hearing them talk about kung fu movies was insane. It wasn't just like I would do with my friends, oh, did you remember that scene in Drunken Master 2 when Jackie did this and he did that? They broke it down to the sounds. They were comparing punches to snares. They were comparing kicks to bass drum hits. They actually compared the sound effects to music, which I thought was so, so incredibly poetic. A couple years later, RZA went to Beijing to shadow Quentin on the set of his masterpiece, Kill Bill. How many of you seen Kill Bill? Yes, it's incredible. Not only did RZA spend his own time and own money to go out there and study with Quentin, but he also had the humility to acknowledge Quentin as somebody who was his superior in his field. This is another point that I make to you. In order to learn, you have to be humble. You have to recognize that somebody knows more than you, and you really may not know as much as you think. You have to be humble. Years later, RZA made a movie called Man with the Iron Fist. Have any of you seen that? Okay, it's a kung fu movie as well. So people say, well, Sophia, what do you think of Man with the Iron Fist? The most extraordinary thing about that movie to me is that a boy, one of 11 children, to a single mother, being raised in the projects of Brooklyn and Staten Island, who at 8 years old, 8, that's I think second grade, third grade, was sneaking, cutting school and sneaking, taking a bus to the ferry, to the train, sneaking with his 13-year-old cousin to go see kung fu movies in Times Square, dirty, shitty, grimy Times Square, would against all odds grow to be a man who wrote, directed, scored, and starred in his own kung fu movie years later. RZA is actually living his childhood dream. There aren't many people I can say that about. And yet RZA's career did not come without setbacks or tragedies. On November 13th, 2004, I was supposed to have dinner with RZA, and when he didn't show up, I called him, and I heard the phone get answered, and there was silence, and then he just said, So he's gone. And ODB had overdosed at his 36-chamber studios. One of Riz's greatest moments as a leader, and I assure you he's had many, was at Dirty's funeral. I'm going to read you an excerpt from his eulogy. Quote, "When we can't be satisfied with ourselves and can't find happiness, you find other things to make you happy. Sex, drugs, alcohol. And the abuse of sex, drugs, and alcohol will take any one of us out of here. I don't think that God kills any of us. He wants us to have life, but I do believe we kill ourselves and we allow each other to kill ourselves. When I think about Asan, which is what was Dirty's righteous name, when I think about Asan, I'm going to take 5% of the blame, because when I saw him doing things that were wrong, I refrained myself from intervening. Never neglect each other. If you see somebody hurting, reach out. Dirty told me, yo, I'm dying. I took it as, he's just high or he's just talking out of his mouth, but it was real. Don't ever take what someone is telling you from their heart as a joke, because everything is real. And if you don't believe that it's real, then the Most High will show you how real it can be," end quote. What I would further suggest to you is, if you're hurting, reach out to someone, whether a friend, family member, spiritual leader, suicide, crisis hotline, whatever. You don't have to go through it alone. And unfortunately, depression often goes specifically undiagnosed in the Black community. The National Alliance on Mental Illness reports, quote, "In the African American community, many people misunderstand what a mental health condition is and don't talk about this topic. This lack of knowledge leads many to believe that a mental health condition is a personal weakness or some sort of punishment from God. African Americans may be reluctant to discuss mental health issues and seek treatment because of the shame and stigma associated with such conditions," end quote. According to the CDC, suicide is the third leading cause of death among Black men aged 15 to 24. I think that many in the industry blunt their depression with drugs and alcohol. I have no judgment of these indulgences, of course, until they impact someone's well-being or that of those around them. Although almost all of my clients were moderate to heavy weed smokers, I never had an issue with them being high, only drunk. Being high never made them messy or belligerent. And no one has ever killed somebody driving high. No one has ever gone home and beat the shit out of their wife and kids because they were high. And no one has ever died from a weed overdose. By far, to me, the more deleterious substance is alcohol. I once pulled a client backstage after a major New York show, and all of his boys were high-fiving him, and I said, "You were sloppy. You were sloppy on stage because you were drunk, and therefore your greatness diminished." That was years ago. He remembers that conversation to this day and brings it up and is grateful that I was that frank with him. I told another client that I had to stop working with him if he didn't stop drinking, because I feared that it would be his demise and I couldn't just sit by and watch that happen. But don't get me wrong, weed can still act as a crutch. And when used in excess, can be a sign of self-medication. I am certain, I know that depression is far more prevalent in the industry than people let on. DMC from Run DMC just published a memoir about his battle with depression and alcohol abuse. And as you all know, Kid Cudi just made a very public entry into a facility, into rehab, and I applaud both of them for their courage and being open about it, because it starts a conversation. More of us need to get into this conversation, particularly with the rampant opioid abuse that is gripping this country. I mean, back in my day, MCs barely talked about anything more than weed. What do they talk about now? Come on, tell me. Molly, lean, Xans, perk, acid, Vike. It's a very different landscape now, particularly with prescription drugs. So 4 years ago, the industry and I personally suffered another massive loss. We lost Chris Lighty, God rest his soul, to suicide. Some people just thought that he was murdered. I think that he killed himself. And of course, that led to a lot of guilt. I don't know if any of you have ever been unfortunate enough to lose anybody to suicide. Look, from the outside, he was on top of the world. He was a hip-hop mogul. He managed Busta, 50, Diddy, Mariah. He did the Glasso, he did the vitamin water deal for 50. But in the weeks following his death, the conversations that I had with friends, with his friends and family and the people that knew him, I realized that it wasn't all as shiny as it seemed. The last time I saw him 24 hours before he died. And I remember it so clearly like it was yesterday. I remember exactly where we were, what the weather was, what he was wearing. He said, "Come back and see me tomorrow, Soph." And I had every intention of going. I would never pass up an opportunity to see him. You see, Chris Lighty was my rock of Gibraltar. He was the wind in my sails. He was my shelter from the storm. I would go to him as readily with the business dilemma as I would with a crush or a heartbreak, and he was always there to make me feel better and make me feel safe. And he taught me so much about loyalty, which is a quality that you, as you get older, will learn to value. And in hip-hop in particular, is a very, very important trait to possess. So friends, when they found out that I'd just seen him, they said, "Well, how did he seem? Did you see anything?" But if there were signs, I didn't notice. You see, I don't think Chris ever really wanted me to see the depth of his despair. And I discuss this in the hopes of starting a broader conversation around this issue. Believe me, this is not easy for me to talk about. It blows a clean, cold hole right back through my heart every time I do. But what I am grateful for is I took every opportunity to tell Chris how and why I loved him. I told him vividly, earnestly, and explicitly. And I think it's tragic that so many of us wait until we're standing at a podium in front of a flower-covered casket to express these thoughts. So I'm going to ask all of you one thing when you leave this room. Call somebody that you love. Your mother, your brother, your girlfriend, your aunt, whoever it is, and tell them how much you love them and why. It is a primal human need to be loved. And I believe that it's also a deep desire to be told why. Chris was one of the first person in the industry to take me under his wing, and what a mighty wing it was. Next was Wu-Tang. Wu-Tang was the first, they were the first people to say, "Soph, you're family." And I didn't really know what that meant, but it quickly became clear. Back in '93, I was up at the RCA offices writing the video treatment for Cream with Raekwon on a typewriter, which you guys have never probably even seen before. Google it. When we were done, I got up to leave, and all the boys were there. I think they'd just done our day of press or something. I got up to leave, and I said, "All right, you guys, I'm going to go." And Meth and Ghost jumped up. "Well, how are you going to get home?" "I'm going to take the train." "We're going to walk you to the station." "You guys, it's middle of the afternoon. It's broad daylight. We're in Times Square. I'm going to be fine. Don't worry." But they insisted, and I said, "Okay, you guys." We walked to Times Square. Have any of you ever been to New York? Have any of you ever taken the subway? Have you ever been to the Times Square station? All right, well, it's fucking millions of people. And it's broad daylight. So I had no fear. But of course, I let them walk me there, and I hugged them goodbye, and I started going down the stairs. And as I was going down this crowded stairway, and I'm there with, all these throngs of people going to the subway. Now, these boys are tall. They are 6'3" and 6'4", and they're big, and they can be very menacing if they want to. So I'm like, "Okay, bye, I love you," and I'm walking down the stairs. They leapt over the railing, and they said, "Sophie!" Yelled, and I mean at the top of their lungs. "Sophie, if anybody fucks with you, you tell them you're with Wu-Tang, because if anybody comes near you, we'll come and we'll fuck them up." Everybody else on the platform was like, and I carry that with me everywhere that I go. So that's what it means to be a member of the Klan. And I never, ever, ever took that for granted. I always understood from the beginning of going into the industry that I was being welcomed into a world that was not my own. This was indeed a privilege. And I think it's critical for those of us who are in hip-hop, who are not black or brown, to acknowledge this privilege. I'm dismayed by the incidents of racism that I've seen in the time that I've been in the industry. Just recently, I was running a marketing meeting. I don't know, 20, 30 people. It was a big marketing meeting. And I asked about one of our artists. And one of my most senior staffers, a white woman, I said, well, what's going on with him? Well, you know, what about his trip to LA? Well, he's not going to go to LA until we move his mother out of the hood. And she actually rolled her eyes, and she smirked. And on the surface, look, I understand it. This statement may seem innocuous. But when we understand that the language of racism, and every other prejudice for that matter, is highly codified, then you see the inherent racism in her statement. I spoke to the owner of the company, a white guy, and I said, you know, I think that what Jane said was pretty racist, and he didn't see it at all. But then I talked to one of our artists who was black, and I said, I think Jane is a racist. Oh, Soph, I know she's a racist. You have to acknowledge your privilege. You have to be in tune with this kind of language. And what I found so galling about her statement was that she clearly didn't care. I know the artist that she was talking about. I know why he was so concerned. Because his little sister and his mother and his father lived in an extremely dangerous part of his hometown. And it was really important to him that if he was going to go to California and leave them for a while, that they were going to be safe. Safe. I'd listened to his music, and I wanted to know at what experience at the tender age of 20 could have filled his art with such violence and rage and loss and pain. When I first met him, he told me a story about walking his little sister to school when she was in kindergarten. Just walking down the streets, and right there across the street, there's a guy in an SUV talking to another guy outside of the SUV, and the guy in the SUV pulls out a gun and shoots the guy. His sister is 5. She's traumatized. And he said, but you know what's fucked up, Soph? Didn't even faze me, because I'd already seen it so many times by then. He was 13. 13. So I'm sure this woman that worked for me, never asked him about why he was so concerned about his family and their current situation. And what I want for people, what I'm trying to encourage you to do, especially now, especially on November 10th, is engage in the conversation. Look, here she was, a girl, this woman, she's enjoying the hip-hop lifestyle. She's getting the free kicks. She's smoking blunts backstage. She's going on the road, IG photos, snapping, here I am on the road with X or Y or Z rapper, but never really having the hard conversation. And that's why I put that up. And I recently read this post from Dr. John Paul that sums it up beautifully. Do you really have black friends? If none of your black friends have ever had an honest, open, unashamed, unflinchingly real conversation with you about race and how it affects them in their daily lives, then you do not have black friends. You just know some black people. And of course, you can replace black with Asian, native, brown, bi, gay, trans, whatever it is. Again, get in the conversation. So that's my talk, and I actively engage in these conversations almost daily. And my walk, in my last 2 jobs, when I was in a position to hire, I hired 5 women of color and 1 lesbian. And Jane fired her ass. So a lot of people ask me, I've been getting asked this question a lot throughout my career and in the last couple of days, being on campuses. So how did you navigate being the first Asian woman in hip-hop? Well, I'd say the more salient piece was simply being a woman in such a male-dominated, hyper-male industry. Not only were the executives and artists predominantly men, but most of the music itself ranged from mildly sexist to highly misogynistic, especially lately. Women are seen more as objects than they are as friends or partners or romantic interests. And while I don't want to be objectified, I am profoundly aware that this is not a level playing field. And as my brilliant friend Joan Morgan would say, Soph, beauty is capital. Thus, as a woman, I use every weapon in my arsenal to get me in the room and to get myself a seat at the table. I mean, look at me today. Gucci, Alaya, Kazaba. Now I sound like a rapper. I'm wearing a dress. Snap, snap, snap. I'm wearing a dress so tight it could fucking kill me if I start laughing too hard. I'm wearing 4-inch stilettos. Believe me, if I had my choice, I'd be in sweatpants and sneakers, like most of the men. Just kidding. You guys have it so easy. But here's the hitch. And I've been saying this a lot over the last couple of days. I'm aware of all of this. But once I'm in the room, I have that shit on lock. Because I've got this, and I've got this. When I leave the room, I want people to say, wow, she's so smart, as opposed to, she's really hot. They can say both. I'm fine with them saying both, but I want them to say the first one first. The notable exception is I had a meeting with Tupac in '92, maybe, and we're sitting across from each other at the table, and he was leaning really far back, and I could see him looking under the table. And one of the executives asked him a question, and he just looked and he said, I have no idea what you just asked me, and I'm not paying attention. And the only thing that I will remember from this meeting is that Sophia Chang's got great legs. And I thought, I'll take that one. I'm okay with that. I'm good with that. Pac gets a pass. But look, being Asian came with both its drawbacks and benefits. People couldn't figure out, at this time, back in '89, '90, what an Asian woman could possibly be doing in hip-hop. But again, I crushed that box. And when people understood that I was a massive fan and a huge proponent of the culture, I was then welcomed. What's interesting is that hip-hop helped usher in my Asian Renaissance. The native tongues were an integral part of the Afrocentric movement of the late '80s and the early '90s. And that impacted me deeply. Watching these artists yearn for a connection to their motherland kindled in me a curiosity about mine. And this is the bigger catalyst for this awakening, of course, came with Wu-Tang. As a child, in a desperate desire to assimilate, I lost my language and rejected my culture like so many first-generation immigrants. But experiencing Wu-Tang's deep love of and respect for Asian culture was phenomenally empowering. In addition to Kung Fu flicks, they introduced me to a world of modern Asian masculinity through the lens of my favorite filmmaker, John Woo, and his artful muse, Chow Yun-fat. If you guys have never seen a John Woo movie, I highly recommend going to see one. And in these movies, as an Asian woman, it was revelatory for me to enter this world of cinema where my brothers were the hero, the villain, the lover, as opposed to the shitty, tiny roles to which Hollywood had relegated them. Emasculated. They were all emasculated, and in these movies, they were hot. What I loved about hip-hop and Wu-Tang in particular was that it gave me permission not only to be angry, but to express my anger. Despite my good grades and my deference to the Confucian ideal, I was never the model minority. Fuck the model minority is how I feel. As a petite Asian woman, I never had the choice to simply lean in. Oh, fuck that. I had to punch and kick my way through the door. I had to learn to be big and strong in other ways. And as the RZA would say, my tongue is my sword, and I promise you, I have eviscerated many in my day. So to close, I'd like to shout out every kid in school, whoever made fun of my parents' names, turned your nose up at our food, or came up to me and said, Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, look at these. To anyone that ever asked me, is your pussy sideways? Can you see when you smile? Are you a tiger mom? To every man who ever greeted me with a konnichiwa or a ni hao ma, or told me that your girlfriend was Asian, like I give a fuck. You see, What you have to understand is that with each of those microaggressions, it just added a plate to my suit of armor. And you created this warrior who is impervious to your bullshit bigotry. With every chink that was spat my way, I was prompted to crush the box. With every jap, I was prompted to pursue my passion. And with every gook, I was pushed to tell my story. Know this, your small-mindedness fuels my prodigiousness. Your ignorance, my knowledge, and your weakness, my power. My name is Sophia Chang, and I was raised by Wu-Tang. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening.
I'll ask Sophia a couple of questions, and then I just want to make sure that I turn it over to you, because I'm sure you have a ton of them, and ultimately this is an event for you. Your story just touched.
How amazing is Panos, by the way? And where did Nicole just go? And Nicole.
Nicole's somewhere here.
Oh, okay.
It's a team effort.
Yes, it is.
Your story just touched a lot of raw nerves, but I want to just ask you a couple of questions about your personal journey. You've gone through a lot of metamorphoses in your life, and you've navigated through a lot of situations.
I just have to take the slide off because it's enraging me.
Yes, I'm with you. Cool, even better.
That was only a week ago, by the way.
That's insane. One of the things that I feel is common between the traditional entrepreneurial journey and the creative journey, which for me are one and the same.
Intrinsically,
really.
sure.
They're intrinsically the same. As we were talking over lunch, we call this Institute for Creative Entrepreneurship because every one of you, even if you can't spell or pronounce the word, which I still have the same issue in terms of this fancy term, but you are creators that aspire to go and have careers, and you will make your job. You're not going to get a traditional job, and that's why we call it entrepreneurship. But fundamentally, entrepreneurs are creators. They want to see a different world, and as you said, none of us are in this college because we want to make a ton of money. You know, that's a byproduct of a job well done. We're here because we want to change the world. We have something we're dying to express, and to me, that's true, whether you're an artist, whether you're a business person, a product designer. But one of the things that we don't talk enough about is the resilience that one needs. So I'm curious, Sophia, and you touched a bit upon this, but are there some personal habits you've developed over the years that enable you to sort of find your center?
It's a really good question, and it's a really good point. Resilience, flexibility, determination, discipline. In terms of personal habits, I would say that training. You know, I go to the gym 6 days a week. I do Kung Fu 6 days a week. And it's really, really important to me, especially as a parent, because it's the time that's all about me. You know, I can be a superhero at times, but I always need to recharge my battery. And especially after becoming a mother, and you know this because you have 5-year-olds, you have to take time to refill, to recharge, to recenter. So that's one of the ways I do it is through my physical discipline. I consider that to be a part of my meditation. I would say that the other thing is that I surround myself with people who are smarter than me. There aren't many. No, I'm just kidding. You know, I've always said that I want to have a TV show called All My Friends Are Smarter Than Me. I have brilliant friends who are not only brilliant, but they are wise and kind and compassionate and loyal and empathetic and sympathetic and devoted to helping me lead a better life and be a better person. And they help recenter me, whatever it is that I'm going through. Whether I've got a 14 and a 16-year-old, I'm raising them as a single mother in New York, and that's fucking hard. It's hard. And I might be stressed out, like I've just been saying over the past couple months, calling my friends like, fuck, my kids are gonna go to college, man. How am I gonna get them into these schools? They're not, you know, they're not these super uber overachievers. I never wanted that for my kids. So they kind of bring me back and they help me achieve this resilience that you're talking about, right? But at the end of the day, it is all about what's at your core. And what I would recommend is that figure out what your core is. Figure out what the core of your passion is, of your wisdom, of your power, especially to the women, especially to you women out there. We are never really told how to seek these out. We're not told to go play that sport or go do this or go do that. And I'm not saying that it has to be sports, but find whatever that center is. And once you have that center and you know who you are at your core, as a result, you will also have much more self-awareness and self-confidence. And confidence has opened many doors for me. It has ushered me into conversations that I never would have been able to be party to. And it's gotten me through a lot of my career.
At lunch, we were talking about the concept of, you just touched on it, getting good people, hiring good people, teaming up with good people. And I know that in my journey in running a business, or even here at Berklee, the biggest and toughest decisions you make in life are around people, yet it's something that nobody ever prepares us for that.
No.
When students go to classes and they want to learn about, quote, business, everybody talks about business plans. And I say, fuck business plans, let's talk about people plans, let's talk about culture plans, because the things that kill you are rarely financial issues,
Right.
bad marketing decisions. They're often the decisions to hire wrong, team up wrong. Somebody who's a founder of Newberry Comics, which is one of the big chains around here, said to me, Panos, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're getting really bad advice.
You're an idiot, yeah.
And you know, it took me maybe 35 years to figure that out. But curious from your standpoint, what are the attributes you're looking for, whether it's artists you're working with, whether it's partners in a business, whether it's some advisors or these people that you talked about surrounding yourself with to get you through?
Well, I have to separate artists out. That's different because there I'm looking for raw talent, right? There I'm looking for talent that just inspires me and I know I can knock on every door and just pick up the phone day after day after day. Cold call. I will go to no end for my artist if I believe in him or her. So to me, the raw talent is really important. But then so too is the person, right? Because what you're talking about is that, you know, your company might crumble. It might not be about infrastructure. It might just be human frailty, right? So at this stage of my life, somebody could be tremendously talented, but if they're a dick, I'm not working with them. Life is too short. I can't do that. I look for, like I talked about with the RZA, intellectual curiosity. You can't, and what I said about stepping out of your comfort zone and challenging yourself. You might be really smart and really accomplished and wealthy and powerful and all of those things, but if you're not at that mill every day trying to figure out how to be a better person, you know, how to be closer to God, whatever that means to you, then I can't be around you. Because for me, the purpose of becoming a better person is not self-serving, it's to be in the service of other people. I believe that we are put here to serve other people. When Judgment Day comes for Sophia Chang, and I sit across from God, Buddha, Allah, Vishnu, whoever it is, and she asks me about why I should be let through the gates. Her question will not be, how much money did you save for that company? Or how rich and famous did you make that artist? No, The questions that I will be asked is, how well did you raise your children? And how many people did you help along the way? I believe that we are put here to be in a community and to be in the service of others. So all of my friends are furiously smart and very funny. Now that's just a personal thing. I love to laugh. My friends are incredibly smart. I also don't, incredibly funny. I don't think that you can be incredibly funny and not also be very smart as a specific kind, right? And again, they are compassionate and they are wise and they are patient and they are loving and they are loyal. And loyal meaning to the point that they'll always support me when I'm doing well and they'll be there to cheer me on, but they'll also gently admonish me when I'm going wrong. You know what, Soph? You went a little too far that time. You don't realize, but when we were sitting at dinner and you said that, you hurt his feelings. And I need to hear that because almost all of us are tone deaf to ourselves. We don't, you know, we're very keyed into how everybody else is acting, but we're not paying very close attention to how we ourselves are interacting with people or behaving. So intelligence and humor and kindness and loyalty, those are things that I consider to be of paramount importance when it comes to the people that I'm surrounding myself with. The people that I have a choice, right? If I go work at a company, of course I can't choose who those people are. You can't. That's not self-determining unless I run the company. Mm-hmm. And then I can choose everybody. And then, yes, as you said, you know, it's really hard to know what somebody's going to be like. You know, Panos and I have been in the position where we've been able to hire people, and until you really get in the trenches with them, you don't know. You don't. You could have the most astonishing resume and give a great interview, but until I get you in the office and ask you to do your job and have you interact with other people, I don't know how good you are at your job. And you also, for me, in terms of work, you have to be a team player. You have to be a team player. I'm sure you found this as well. The people that say I all the time, they have an I problem. You need to say we. When I ran a department and when I ran a company, I always said we. And the only time I used the first person singular was when there had been a fuck up. And then I took responsibility. But otherwise, when I was heaping praise, I would either say, you know, John or Suzanne or whatever did a great job, or you guys, we did a great job with this release. But if there was a fuck up, I would say, you know what, I didn't pay close enough attention. I dropped the ball. I messed up. But team players in the workplace is critical.
So both of us have been on that side of the stage. We've been 18, 19, 20. I think
so long ago.
An amazing thing that I certainly didn't appreciate when I was that age is that you mostly only look forward. Mm-hmm. You can only see the future. Mm-hmm. You know, once you start hitting your 40s, you start seeing your past too. But I'm curious if you were to revisit your 20-something, your 19, 20-year-old self today, what would you tell them? I find that sometimes the biggest challenge for anybody sitting in those chairs, and again, we've both been there, is you have a hard time kind of seeing how you go from there, you know, to here. So curious about any words of wisdom, piece of advice you would give to your 21-year-old self.
So let me deconstruct the question a little bit. I don't live with regret. That's not part of my makeup. It's not part of how I live. I certainly learned from my mistakes. And mistakes are gifts, people. You will fuck up. You will stumble. You will fall. You will let the ball drop. You will disappoint people. This is what happens. There is no such thing as learning without making a mistake. Nobody tries something for the first time and is expert or even proficient at it. So embrace your mistakes. Because if you are self-aware enough to sit back and to assess why you made that mistake and how you can be better the next time, that's a gift. That's a gift. Everything is a gift. But I don't live with regrets. I am Self-analytical, I am self-critical, I am self-renewing, but I do not live with regrets. I have very few regrets. The only regrets I have in my life is when I'm a shitty mother. When I do things to my children that I shouldn't have. That is something that hurts me deeply to my core. But in terms of professionally, I don't really have regrets like that. What would I say to a 19 or 20-year-old Sophia Chang? I would say a lot of it is about race and a lot of it is about gender. These are things that came to me, like I said, through hip-hop. You know, my proximity to hip-hop culture and watching, you know, virtually every artist that I worked with was black, male, came from a poor background, some from a criminal background, and I'd never been around people like that. And the education that I got really opened my eyes to what's going on in this country, and I'm raising my children that way. I know a lot of people are uncomfortable having those conversations, but like I said, we need to get into those conversations. So I would probably say, understand what you will go up against as a woman of color, as an Asian woman. Be more sensitive to what other people are going through, because I got there later, and I wish I'd been more aware earlier. But in terms of what I would do for my career, I wouldn't change anything. I got hired, I quit, I got hired, I got fired, I don't give a shit. You know, I did what I did, and if you look at my resume and you heard what I said, I mean, I've had a lot of jobs. I've never been at a single job for more than 2.5 years, but I hardly consider myself a failure. There are lifers out there, people that spend 10, 15, 20, 30 years at a certain job, and we need those people. I'm just not one of those people. I don't define my success that way. I don't define my success by money or power. I define my success by how much I'm allowed to fulfill my dreams or pursue my passion or tell my story, crush my box, and how well I provide for my kids, and just how happy I am. I am an indelibly happy person, and for all the reasons that I just cited, what I've been allowed the privilege to be able to do throughout my career.
Is my last question I want to make sure that we opened up to everyone. You know, it's interesting you talked about having had different jobs, and 30 years ago, I think the average person probably had 2.5 jobs in their lifetime, maybe 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. Right now, the expectation is that the average person, especially your age, will probably have about 8. Mm-hmm. And you may be sitting there saying, I'm never going to have a traditional job. It's okay. You know, as we said at the beginning, you're going to go out there and create your life. You will build your life. Mm-hmm. But what's interesting is that when you have 7, 8 different, quote, jobs, you're also, that means that you're working and adjusting and adapting to different industries. Mm-hmm. I mean, yourself, you've had such an amazing journey: music, film, marketing, martial arts, the weed business. Mm-hmm. Looking at your makeup, looking at who you are, the fabric of your own being, what do you think are the skills that have been translatable and transferable through every one of these versions of Sophia Chang? Because I always feel like when you take a new job, it's like inhabiting a new role.
Right.
You know, I was a talent agent for 6 years of my life, booking most of my idols, my jazz idols. And then one day I was like, I do not want to be identified with this role. And then I started a company. I did that for 13 years. Most people thought of me as Mr. Sonic Bits, and I'm like, fuck that. I'm not, this is not just what I am. And now, who would have ever told me, you know, even 6 years ago, that I'd be in an educational institution, you know? But the amazing thing is that you start realizing as you get older that, you know, there's some skills and instincts that you have as a human being that miraculously, as disconnected as some of these businesses are, they're translatable and transferable. So I'm curious from your end, which are those, and any advice that you have to the students?
Sure. Well, first I'll say that you did the 3 things that I talked about, right? You pursued your passion, you told your story, and you crushed the box, right? Every time someone tried to put you in a box, you bucked against that. You didn't like that. Don't tell me who I am. Don't tell me that these 4 walls or 6 walls of a box define me. right? And my guess is that that is the spirit of a lot of people sitting in this room. In terms of transferable talents, I mean, I'll talk about it in two buckets, right? I'll talk about it in the personal bucket and I'll talk about it in the professional bucket. In the personal bucket, I always go back to confidence. I always go back to confidence.
How do you build that?
That's a really good question. And I don't think we're necessarily born with it, especially if we're other. I think you build that by figuring out what it is that you're passionate about, what it is that you're good at, and fostering that. I was never going to be a great golfer.
Thank God.
You know, thank God.
Nobody, the world does not need any more great golfers, or any golfers for that matter, but that's a different story altogether.
Finding that thing that you're passionate about and really pursuing it, but having the discipline to work at it. You know, I mean, some of the greatest athletes in the world, sure, they have God-given gifts, but they practice their asses off. They work at it for hours and hours and hours a day, just like all of the artists that I worked at. They write, all the rappers, they write every day. In Kung Fu, we have a saying, sharpen your sword every day. Every day. If you stop training for one day, you lose 3. I think about that all the time. Fuck, I have to keep training. I will train for the rest of my life. So confidence is really, really important to build. Being personable is really important too. Being able to network. You have to learn how to network. It is really important to get out there and to meet people. And it is not easy at first, but it gets easier. It's the beauty of everything in life, is that it's experiential, meaning that the more you practice it, the better you get at it. You may never get to a level of mastery, but it doesn't matter. You will improve, I promise you, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So that's kind of on the personal side. You know, being kind and being magnanimous. You know, people know these things. Being loyal, like I said, that's a really, really big deal. I learned that very early in life, being loyal to people. When I worked at Paul Simon, I was very young. When I worked at Paul Simon, I was just in my early 20s, and my boss, who was Paul's tour manager, they'd just come off the Graceland tour, a huge worldwide tour, millions and millions of dollars. And he had left a really financially sensitive document on the copier. And Paul's manager stormed in, waving it, and said, "Who left this on the copier?" And I said, "I did. I took the heat for it, even though it wasn't me, because I didn't want my boss to get in trouble." And it got back to my boss, and my boss came to me and he said, "Sophia, Ian told me what you did for me, and I really appreciated it." And there was a shift, because he understood that I was willing to put myself on the line for him. Loyalty is so key. Be loyal to other people, and you will get that in return. Not being disloyal, you will not have people be loyal to you, and you watch how cold and lonely that feels. You have to be loyal. So that's kind of on the personality side. In terms of the professional side, there's a very specific thing that I enjoy doing and that I do as a manager, and what my strengths are is that I'm really hyper organized. Some might call me anal. I'm very organized, and you know, I was telling some people earlier that Riza said, "You know what, Soph, when people ask me about you, I tell them you're the most organized person I know." And I was like, that's so boring. My God, of all the things you could say about me, I'm the most organized person you know. And he said, "But you don't understand, Soph. For somebody like me, you being organized and being my manager is everything to me." And Raphael said the same thing. He said, "You know what I tell people about you, Soph? I tell them you're the best manager I've ever had and that you never let a ball drop." And it felt so banal to me, you know, that the thing that they valued so much was how organized I was and that I had such good follow-through. But then I embraced it, Panos. I said, "You know what, Soph? It is important. Just because you see that as being relatively boring, if your artists and they are your clients and you're in service of them are telling you that's important, then you have to embrace that." So I think the fact that I am very organized and I have great follow-through and that I don't let balls drop, that is a huge relief to many, many people. You know, we talked about this. It's hard, it's as simple as it sounds, that bar is low. There aren't a lot of people that know how to do that. So I'm the person that when I walk in the room, people go, oh, thank God Sophia Chang is here. I don't have to worry anymore. You know, I don't have to ask her 2 or 3 times if she's taking care of something. My mentor, Michael Lawson, says about me, Soph, she's a heat-seeking missile. Tell her to go do something, and she's off, and she's gone, and you'll never catch her, and you'll never have to ask her if she's doing her job. That is really important, and that translates to every single industry. Whether I was a manager, whether I was at a label, whether I was managing my ex's temple. I'd never done Kung Fu before. Suddenly I'm managing a Buddhist temple in a martial arts school. You know, I instituted all the systems and the schedule and wrote the rules and everything, whether I was producing a fashion show, right? So producing a fashion show, production is all about being organized and keeping everybody on the same page. Communication is a really, really big deal. You got to keep everybody communicating properly. I live my life in a spreadsheet. How many of you know how to use Excel? Good. Excel is my friend. My packing list to come to Boston is in an Excel spreadsheet, color-coded. Part of that is that I have a phenomenally poor memory. Blame that on my kids. You know, once you get pregnant, your memory goes out the window. Your wife would probably tell you this. But I do everything on Excel. I do my budgets on Excel. You know, I put my blog posts in Excel. I do my packing list in Excel. I do my gift shopping in Excel. I see everything as a grid, but that's also just how I'm a very visual person. That's how I see things. But I think being organized and having great follow-through and being thorough is really, really important. And if I'm that person, and if I'm a person that can own something, like give me that project, tell me how to do it, okay, it's done. I might come and ask you a couple of questions, but I'm gonna own it and be done. If people trust that you can do that, it goes a long way in any industry. Translates into any industry.
Well, I wanna open it up for all of you. Make sure, I always like to have our speaker know who is talking and who the audience is. So if you say your name, your major, and avoid acronyms. So she doesn't know what CWP, MPNE, EPD, blah, blah, blah is, MBM. So just say your major and also what country you're from. The coolest thing about Berklee is that 38% of our students are non-US. Folk, and I think it's such a strength of ours.
And I'll give you this advice as well. Always introduce yourself first name and last name. So you choose.
Off you go.
Hi, my name is Sherry Lee. We met
Yes.
today. I'm from Vancouver. I'm a Chinese-Canadian.
Cool. A fellow Canadian and Vancouverian.
Vancouver, yeah.
My question is, so how do you stay assertive yet charismatic at the same time? So letting people know that you're smart but not piss them off.
Well, it's a dance. It's a tightrope walk, right? Especially for women. We just saw that on the campaign. You know, we see it all the time with assertive women. I mean, we know the stereotype, right? A man is assertive and, yeah, that's my dude, bro, yeah, that's my bro and everything. But a woman behaves like that and she's immediately labeled as a bitch, right? There have been extensive studies done about this, right? Where people will be given a description of a man that behaves a certain way, and then a woman who behaves, just change the name and the pronouns, and she behaves in precisely the same way, and he will be graded much higher. I'd love to work with a guy like him. I do not want to work with a woman like her. So it's not easy. It's not easy, and especially for Asian women, right? We are saddled and yoked by the stereotype that we're going to be submissive, right? Told you I'm not the model minority. I say, fuck your model minority. Don't put that shit on me. Whatever preconceived notions you have about me, whatever fucking geisha to go fantasies you have about me, get rid of that, because I'm not that person. So I live my life defying stereotype, whether it's gender or whether it's race. And yes, I rub a lot of people the wrong way, and I know that. And I've been told that. I've been told that by people very close to me. So if you went a little bit too hard there. But I would always rather go too hard than not go hard enough. That's my identity politics. But it's trial and error. Part of it is also knowing how to read a room. This is what comedians, stand-up comedians, are brilliant at. Whether it's 6 people, 60 people, 6,000, 60,000, they know how to read a room. They know how to speak to their audience, when to pull back, when to go forward, when to go left, when to go right. You will always risk, as a woman and as an Asian woman, when you're assertive, being considered bitchy. You will always risk that. You will walk with that. It is a matter of just testing. Where is the edge of that? It's like your kid when they're 2 years old, terrible twos. I got to test. Oh my God, how soon are you going to be 3? You know, and for teenagers too.
I'm in that age.
You are, yeah. As children and as teens, we were constantly testing our parents to see where the boundaries are. It's a necessary stage of our evolution, right? And as people that go out into the workforce, this is going to be part of your evolution, is that you will try, and sometimes you'll fail, and sometimes you succeed. But when you fail, you've got to sit back and ask yourself, how could I have done that better? And when you succeed, you sit back and ask yourself, why was I successful that time but not that time? I may have behaved exactly the same way, but maybe the room was different. Maybe that wasn't the tone they set. Maybe they didn't want Sophia Chang to barge in and bang my fist on the table and say, this is what we've got to do. Not every event calls for that. So I try to be sensitive to what's going on and not necessarily do that. It's just going to be through trial and error. But the good thing is that you are aware that this is how you will typically be prejudged.
Wow, plenty of questions. We have about 15-ish minutes, so keep your questions brief. Yeah.
Hello, thank you. My name is Ayende Webb. I'm from California, and I'm in the professional music major here, which is you basically create your own track here.
Terrific.
And personally, I would like to say thank you so much for coming.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
No, because and I wanted to say this, we've had other, managers that have had wonderful careers and been involved with the issue, but they don't speak to us with the level of realness. I mean, you said you raised by Wu-Tang, that's in itself.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
But I think it's important because anybody involved in this, anything socially really, needs to be more critical at this time. So my question is, because we only really see the product, we only really see the after image of what is being projected at us. And for us to absorb that, it's almost like I feel that, I'm going to use the term institution or industry. I feel like that machine, and besides the fact that we don't know how it works, it's also a thing where it's like our cultural capital will be absorbed, but the social gets left. But nobody wants to say anything about the social stuff. Like when Mick Jenkins was on his block just saying what he's saying in the raps, it wouldn't matter, nobody would care, but people are actually buying it. But then at the same time, it's sort of this contradictory thing that it's a battle that's happening. So how can we become more critical? How can we become educated on what we're facing really? Because I see it, and I'm sure a lot of people see it.
What you're facing in terms of the industry, or
yes. The entertainment.
Right. So, I mean, I'm going to make a sweeping generalization, and the generalization is that all of us in this room walk with a certain degree of privilege, right? All of us are safe. All of us have shelter, clean water, food, right? That's the foundation of well-being. All of us walk with that. And beyond that, to me, that's the meat. Everything else is the gravy. So what I would say to you is, being in an institution and studying the music business, you are in a bubble. You have no idea what it's like out there. It's like when I got pregnant, and every pregnant woman, including your wife, I bet, read What to Expect When You're Expecting. I'm
not sure if my wife did, but I'm sure.
Well, it's the go-to, it's kind of the Bible for exactly that, what to expect when you're expecting. Pour through every page, highlight everything. Nothing could have prepared me to be a mother. Nothing can prepare you for what it's really going to be like out there. But how you start to learn is by having people like me come in and tell you and be honest about it. I have no desire to zigzag the country and talk to students like you and candy coat it. Why would I? Why? What do I gain from putting rose-tinted glasses on you? It makes no sense to me.
We did it all year.
Well, I think that you have to ask that of your speakers then. You have to demand that of your speakers. I told Panos this earlier. I've now spoken in 2 months at probably 5, 6 of your local schools. And this is what always gets said to me. Oh my God, thank you for being so honest and so real. Raised by Wu-Tang, I don't know how to be otherwise. I'm constitutionally incapable of being otherwise. But if this is a feeling that you guys have, then it's incumbent upon you to tell your administrators who are hiring the people, do me a favor. I don't want one other corporate person in here to get up here and give me the perfunctory raw speech. I want them to tell me what's real out there, because I don't want to step out into the real world and go, fuck, I'm in free fall. I'm getting shot from every fucking angle. I need a Kevlar. I wish you had told me what I was going to face. You did the opposite. You were a liability because you made it feel like you're going to go to Berklee, you're going to get this degree, you're going to walk out and it's going to be all gravy. No degree says that it's all gravy. Nothing does that for you. So what I would recommend is that you talk to the people that hire the speakers if this is how you feel and say, look, we would really appreciate it if you could hire people that would be more honest and more critical. And part of being critical is being critical of yourself, being critical of others. And I mean this not in the nasty way of like, oh, you shouldn't wear that color, but I mean critical, right? Critical thought. And also to engage in those conversations. And it's about community. It's like I said, it's about telling your story, sharing your story, and having these conversations and finding that there's a commonality and having that kind of critical thought and analysis. That's how you do it. Don't keep it to yourself. But I appreciate the question.
By the way, excellent point. It's one of the reasons why we have this series. Because I've been in your shoes. And you know, I think most of us worry about, quote, protecting you guys. The best thing we can do is prepare you for a life that's coming, and it's inevitable. So the more of these stories you hear, the better. This is the idea behind this series. Real stories by real people. And admittedly, Sophia is the first speaker where we did this format where she spoke for half an hour. And initially, I was kind of freaked out because what I don't want from people is to come with prepared comments that they give us a corporate line. I want us to have open conversations that break down a wall between you guys there and us here, because you know there is no separation between where we are and where you are, right? So the more you hear these stories, I'm hoping that the more you'll be able to see the narrative of how your career can unfold. That's the most important thing of what we're doing with this institute. Whoa.
The dirt ain't dead, baby. The dirt ain't dead.
Yes.
Your last name?
Dara Chopra.
Hi, Dara.
India. Thank you so much for coming. By the way,
Thank you for having me.
to a few of your talks at MIT and stuff, and I'm so happy I could come here. What I wanted to ask you is that.
And Tara, what's your major?
Music business and marketing track. What I want to ask you is that we live in a world today where everyone, I mean, people are doing this less now, but you know, we compartmentalize all the things that we're sort of good at, and we say, oh, this is my focus, or this is my major, and then, you know, there are all these other things that you want to do where you're like, I don't have the time for that. I don't know if, is that my hobby? Is that something I want to do professionally? Is that just a personal thing for me? Where I find with you is that you've sort of explored so many parts of yourself, you know, whether it was dropping everything and sort of like going to Kung Fu, or whatever it may be, where did you find, I mean, when you moved from one thing to another, and when you sort of transitioned for yourself for whatever reasons that you had, did you ever find that what you sort of previously did you ever feel like you would have to, I haven't got what hard to say it.
It's okay.
Like, you know, just like, sometimes you find that you lost base with something, or but you had to do something that was so important for you that you had to leave, and then that would help you come back to something new, you know, and that's the whole experience of life where you feel like you need to sort of you can't go with emotion.
Well, okay. Yes, no, I understand the question. It's a good one. I mean, firstly, in terms of compartmentalizing and having a discipline and a focus, that's okay. That's okay, you know? Like my mentor said to me, because I have many interests in many different disciplines, he said, Soph, you can't boil the ocean. You can't. You are creative people. You want to be creative entrepreneurs. You're in Berklee, you're in the United States. You will meet many fascinating people with a myriad exciting ideas. You can't do them all. That takes discipline. Choosing the one that you're the most passionate about, choosing the one that seems most within your reach. So I don't have a problem with you choosing a discipline, right? I have a problem with you then creating a box around yourself because of that discipline and letting that define you. And in terms of my transitions, I never really thought about it. I walk with very little fear. Again, I have the privilege of being a middle-class person. I will never have to worry about my children being hungry or homeless. I will always have the foundation of well-being. So beyond that, can I be broke sometimes? Yeah. But I'm never scared. I'm not shook. I'm not that person. Because I have the confidence that whatever it is that I take on, I will do well at, I will excel at. And if I'm not good at it at first, I will learn how to be good at it because I will take the time and the effort and the discipline and the rigor to become great at what it is that I've been given the opportunity to do. So the transitions, and in terms of what you're leaving behind, when people say, I'm thinking of moving to LA, but I'm not really sure. New York is not going anywhere. Your family's not going anywhere. Whatever industry you just left is not going anywhere. I would much rather you told me that you took a risk and you did something different than, you know what, Sophia, in the end I decided to kind of play it safe. I wanted to play it safe, so I just stayed here because I never want to be the person who is in my twilight years and said, fuck, I never tried this. And I had the opportunity. You are young. I assume that very few of you are married, very few of you have children, you have parents that will take care of you. You are untethered. You are free. Go do that shit. Whatever it is that's speaking to you that you can try, as long as you're not doing something stupid to put yourself or anybody else in harm's way, go do it. Do it now. Because as you get older, the constraints will become more serious, especially after you have children. I rarely look back like that. I'm never scared of leaving one island because I don't know if I can ever get back to it. So if I don't go back to it, I'll find another one that's even more lush.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions, and then Sophia will stay for a teeny bit after this so you guys can talk with her one-on-one. God, it's always so hard to pick. I'll start from there. Yeah, you.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Camacho.
Hi, Stephanie.
From Colombia. My major is music business.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question. I really admire your confidence and your courage.
Thank you.
And I was just wondering, do you ever have issues with any other women in the industry?
Always.
Of your confidence?
Always. Always. That's bitch shit. And I remember Raphael and Riza said that to me on separate occasions. So if that's just some bitch shit. And I thought, how dare you say that to me? And then later I learned, that was some bitch shit right there. I'm very aware of what I walk with. I have my mother's hummingbird metabolism. I have my father's cheekbones. I'm a relatively attractive woman. I have poise. I have grace. I have style. But I am far from a traditional beauty. Far from it. Look at my hair. I'm fucking crazy. I look nuts. I look like a samurai. It is dismaying to me when women respond to me feeling threatened or intimidated or less than me. That's why I'm telling you, find that thing that makes you beautiful. If I watched television and looked at the movies and fucking poured through every page of Glamour and Allure and Vogue, do you think that, and I counted on that media to tell me how beautiful I was, I'd never be beautiful, ever. I'm never gonna look like those women. I'm never gonna be tall and blonde and white and have that body. And guess what? I wouldn't fucking have it for the world. I love me. I love my skin. I love my body. I love my spirit. And yes, that is a turnoff to a lot of women. And it makes me sad in those moments. But they never slow me down. I will never apologize for the woman that I am. I made myself this woman. Yes, again, genetics. Genetics was kind to me. But this, I made this shit. I go to the gym six days a week, hour and 45 minutes a day. I do this. I chose my sense of style. I forged my physical and aesthetic identity. And I will never apologize to anybody for that. I will acknowledge my privilege. I'll never fucking apologize. And a lot of women say to me, they talk about my weight. The first time they meet me, they'll talk about my weight. And when they find out I've had kids, oh shit, you've had kids? Yeah, bitch, I've had kids. 6 weeks after I gave birth, I was back to my fucking pre-pregnancy weight. That's just me. That's my metabolism. I'm not going to say sorry for that. Go do whatever it is you have to do to find yourself beautiful. Don't look at my beauty and begrudge me my beauty. Go find your own, because I promise you it exists. It's there. And it's not this. It comes from inside. The reason I can be this bad of a bitch is it all comes from the inside. I have this club. Me and my girls have this club that I invented called the Baddest Bitch in the Room Club. Look, I am 51. I'm a single mother of 2. I have the body of a 14-year-old boy. I'm Asian. All that. I don't have any of that. But I know any room I walk in, I am the baddest bitch in the room. I know that. I walk with that. And it's everything that makes me that. It's not this. It's this. It's this. I'm a mother. I do kung fu. I speak French. Whatever it is, we are all, right? We all have those things that make us our totality. And you have to believe that those things, that the sum is always greater than, the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. So find those parts and make your whole and believe that it's beautiful and powerful, because it is. Every one of us has that beauty and our power. And I speak, and I say this more to the women in the room, and especially to the women of color in this room. But yeah, I run up against it every day, all fucking day long. You're welcome.
Okay, one more. I hate doing this. I hate picking the last question.
So I asked you to do it.
Okay, since you were really vocal and you were like, pick me, why not? I'll turn it over to you. And it better be a great question, buddy.
Okay, well, mine will be 2 parts only, because 1 part's on behalf of everyone who wasn't able to ask a question. If we would like to reach out to you in the future, is there a way?
My email is sophchangsocial@gmail.com, but I will be completely honest with you. Do not send me music. I'm not going to listen. I don't have time. I don't really have the interest. I am not an arbiter of pop culture. I don't have my finger on the pulse. I have 2 teenage kids that do that for me. That's not my expertise
You can
anymore.
send to your kids.
Yeah, and if you email me, it will take me a while to get back to you, because I get a lot of these emails, but I assure you that I do read them. sophchangsocial@gmail. It's on my Twitter.
Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Hopefully anyone who wants to pick up on the future. My name's Alexander Anderson.
Hello, Alexander.
I'm Jamaican. I'm studying jazz composition last year here. One of the projects I'm involved in is a mixtape that I'm releasing, my first mixtape. It's called African American.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited. It's kind of my introduction to hip hop, because I've been involved in jazz a lot. And I was going to ask you kind of advice for new independent artists trying to create a larger fan base, reach out to more people, releasing the music. Do you have any advice in regards to that, where you might send it as, a manager, or, places you want to make sure it was sent to, and just any advice to the members in terms of independently?
I mean, this is not really what I do anymore. I don't really do marketing. And when I managed people, they were already people that were legacy artists or had established. So I'm not in the business of breaking artists. But I'll tell you this from working with Joey and the pros and stuff, right? First of all, the material has to be great, which I assume that you trust that it is. And the beautiful thing about the music industry now, as opposed to when I was coming up in the music industry, is all the barriers to entry are gone. So what I would recommend is go look at what your favorite artists are doing and how did they do it, because it's all there. Anything you want to know about different artists, it's pretty much been recorded, whether they've recorded it themselves or whether somebody's done an interview, and find out how they did it. I'll tell you, Joey Badass, when he was 15, he did a video of himself freestyling in his high school. And he put it up online and nobody was looking. And then he put it up, and I think he said, for the title of it, as opposed to 15-year-old rapper freestyles, he put 15-year-old rapper freestyles for World Star Hip Hop. But it wasn't for World Star Hip Hop. But it doesn't matter. He did that, and suddenly he got all this attention, and now he is where he is. That was genius at 15. That was him marketing himself, because he knew that he would get much more attention, and he'd already sent it to World Star Hip Hop like 80 times, and they'd rejected it. But he just kept going, because he believed in himself, and he knew how dope he was. So he did that. So read about stories like that. Honestly, I'm not really the person to ask. Read about stories like that and figure out how people get it up there. You know, there are all sorts of these digital outlets, and it's virtually free. But I can tell you that one thing that everybody focuses on, no matter what genre, is your socials. It's such a socials game. And in terms of doing stuff independently, I think more than ever, I know more than ever that the independent model, especially if you're not looking to be on top 40 radio, the independent model is a very viable one. But go see what other people did that you admire and see how they did it. I promise you, all their stories are out there for you to learn.
Okay, everyone, give a big, 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 big round of applause. Thank you so much, Sophia.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you, Thomas.